I want to ask you a question. And I want you to sit with it, really sit with it, before you answer. Have you ever caught yourself wondering, is my child just going through something difficult right now? Or is something else going on entirely? Maybe you've had that thought late at night, lying awake after another conversation that left you feeling small. Maybe it came to you in the car on the way home from a family dinner. That quiet, uncomfortable question you pushed back down before it could fully form. Because asking it, really asking it, feels disloyal. It feels like a betrayal. But I want to tell you something. Asking that question is not a betrayal of your child. It is the most honest act of love you may have left. On the Strong Elderly Life channel, we talk about the things that matter most for people over 60. The real things, the hard things, the things most people are too uncomfortable to say out loud. Today, we're talking about one of the most painful distinctions a parent can make. The difference between a child who is difficult and a child who is toxic. By the end of this video, you won't have a label for your child, but you will have something far more valuable. Clarity. Let me start by saying something that I hope brings you a moment of relief. The fact that you're watching this video, the fact that you're willing to ask this question at all, does not make you a bad parent. It makes you a brave one. Because this question, is my child difficult or toxic, is one of the hardest questions a parent can face. It requires looking directly at something your heart has been working very hard to protect you from seeing. Now, before we go any further, I want to address the word toxic. It's a word that gets used carelessly sometimes, and I want to use it carefully here. When I say toxic, I am not saying your child is a bad person. I am not saying they are beyond hope. And I am certainly not saying you should walk away from them without another thought. What I am saying is this. A toxic dynamic is one where the behavior is consistent, systematic, and causing measurable harm to you, to your sense of self, to your well-being. And the difference between difficult and toxic is not a difference in degree. It is a difference in kind. Difficult child has real problems, is struggling with specific circumstances. Their hard behavior is connected to something happening in their life. And when things change, they change. Toxic child has a pattern. Their harmful behavior is consistent across different circumstances, different times, different situations. The hard behavior is not a response to what's happening in their life. It is simply how they engage with you. I'm going to walk you through 7 specific differences. And as I do, I want you to pay attention not just to what I describe, but to what you feel while I describe it. Because sometimes the most honest answer to this question lives in your body, not your mind. Let's begin with the most foundational question of all. Where does the behavior come from? With a difficult child, you can almost always trace the hard behavior back to something specific. They're going through a painful divorce. They lost their job. They're struggling with depression or anxiety or health issues they haven't fully dealt with. Their behavior is hard, but it has a context, a reason. And when that context changes, when the job situation improves, when the marriage stabilizes, when they get the support they need, their behavior toward you shifts too. Not perfectly, not overnight, but you can see movement. With a toxic dynamic, the behavior doesn't move with the circumstances. When life gets better for them, you don't feel it. When they get a promotion, when things are going well, when there's no obvious stressor in their life, the way they treat you remains the same. Cold, dismissive, critical, draining. I want to give you a simple question to carry through the rest of this video. When things in their life get better, do they treat you better, or does it stay the same? If the answer is, it stays the same, that tells you something important. Not everything, but something. Every parent and adult child has conflict at some point. That is completely normal. That is part of any real relationship. The question isn't whether conflict happens. The question is what happens after it. With a difficult child, a conflict, even a serious one, can eventually be talked through. Maybe not immediately. Maybe there needs to be some cooling off time. Maybe they said something they shouldn't have. But eventually there's a conversation. Maybe even an acknowledgement. I was out of line. I'm sorry. There is repair. There is the possibility of return. With a toxic dynamic, conflict works differently. No matter how a disagreement starts, no matter what the actual issue is, it ends the same way. You are wrong. You are the problem. You are the reason. There is no acknowledgement of their role. There is no genuine apology. If there is an apology, it comes with conditions, or is quickly reversed. Psychologists have a term for a specific pattern that shows up frequently in these dynamics. DARVO. It stands for deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. You come to them with a concern, something they did that hurt you. Instead of hearing you, they deny it happened. Then they attack you for bringing it up. And then, somehow, by the end of the conversation, they are the one who has been wronged. And you are left apologizing for the thing you came to address. If that dynamic feels familiar, please hear me say this. That is not a communication problem. That is not something couples counseling or a good conversation will fix. That is a pattern. And patterns require a different kind of response. I want you to do something with me. I want you to look back, not at last week, not at last month, but at the last 2 or 3 years of your relationship with this child. What do you see? With a difficult child, even a long stretch of hardship has shape to it. There are difficult seasons, yes. There are times when the relationship is strained. But there are also moments of genuine connection, moments of warmth, moments where you felt seen, valued, appreciated. There is movement. There is variation. There is evidence that the good parts of this relationship are real. With a toxic dynamic, the core pattern doesn't move. There may be good periods. In fact, there often are. Sometimes things will seem better than they've been in years. And you'll feel hopeful. You'll think, this is it. Things are finally changing. And then it returns. The same patterns. The same dynamics. The same feelings. Psychologists call those good periods honeymoon phases. And in a toxic dynamic, they serve a specific purpose, not necessarily a conscious one, but a purpose nonetheless. They keep you in the relationship. They give you something to hold on to. They make the difficult periods feel survivable because you remember the good ones. There is a psychological term for the bond that forms in these cycles: trauma bonding. It is the reason why the good moments with a difficult person can feel more intense, more precious, more meaningful than normal good moments in healthy relationships. Because they have to be survived for. If that resonates with you, I want you to sit with it. Not with judgment. With honesty. This one is perhaps the most concrete difference of all. Watch what happens when you say no. With a difficult child, they may not like your boundaries. They may push back. They may express frustration or disappointment. But ultimately, even if it takes some time, they accept them. They don't like that you can't lend them money right now. They're annoyed. But they deal with it. They wanted you to come for the holidays, and you said you couldn't. They were hurt. But they respected your decision. With a toxic dynamic, a boundary is not something to be respected. It is something to be dismantled. When you set a limit with a toxic child, something specific happens. They escalate. They call more. They involve other family members. They bring up old grievances. They make you feel guilty for having a need at all. They frame your boundary as an attack, as proof that you don't really love them, or that you're a selfish parent, or that you've been hiding something. And often, because you love them, and because you're tired, and because the pressure is relentless, the boundary breaks. And when it breaks, something is communicated. Not out loud, but clearly. Your limits don't count. I want to give you a specific thing to pay attention to. After you set a clear, reasonable boundary with your child, how do you feel? If you feel relieved, if there's a sense of peace, even if it was hard to say, that's a sign of a relationship that can hold a boundary. If you feel afraid, if the first thing you feel is dread about what's coming next, that is the sign of a dynamic where limits have never been truly safe. Every parent knows what it feels like to be told they've made a mistake. That is part of parenting. We are not perfect. We say the wrong thing sometimes. We make decisions we later regret. And it is healthy. It is part of a real relationship, to be told when we've gotten something wrong. But there is a difference between honest feedback and weaponized shame. With a difficult child, even when they express hurt or frustration, it is tied to something specific. A specific incident. A real moment. And when the issue is resolved, or when they've had time to process it, the weight of it lifts. With a toxic dynamic, guilt and shame are tools. Not feelings. Tools. They bring up things you did 15 years ago, not to heal from them, but to use them. They compare you unfavorably to other parents, their friends' parents, their spouse's parents, some imagined ideal of what a parent should be. They use access to your grandchildren as leverage. They make threats, sometimes loud, sometimes quiet, about cutting you off if you don't comply. And the effect of all of this, over time, is something psychologists call chronic shame induction. It is a slow, steady erosion of your sense of yourself as a good person. I want to ask you the most important question of this entire video. And I want you to answer it not with your mind, but with your gut. Do you leave conversations with your child feeling like a bad parent, even when you can't point to anything specific you did wrong? If the answer is yes, I need you to hear me say this. That feeling is not evidence that you are a bad parent. That feeling is evidence of what has been done to you. This one requires honesty. I want you to think about the last time you were genuinely struggling. Maybe you were sick. Maybe you lost a friend. Maybe you went through something frightening or heartbreaking. Maybe you were simply having a very hard week and you needed someone to notice. What did your child do? With a difficult child, they may not always show up perfectly. They may be busy. They may be wrapped up in their own lives in ways that feel frustrating. But when it truly mattered, when the need was real and clear, they came. Maybe not in the way you imagined, maybe imperfectly, but they came. With a toxic dynamic, your pain doesn't produce empathy. It produces one of three things: indifference, a change of subject, or, and this is the one that is hardest to recognize, a pivot to their own experience. You tell them you've been struggling, and somehow, within 2 minutes, you are listening to their struggles. Or they minimize what you're going through. Or they disappear until you seem better, and then reappear as if nothing happened. Empathy, the genuine ability to feel what someone else is feeling and respond to it, is not something that can be taught or demanded. But its absence, consistent pattern-level absence, is one of the clearest indicators that a relationship dynamic is not healthy. And you deserve to be in relationships where your pain matters, even with your own child. And now we come to the seventh difference. The one that, in my experience, tells you more than all the others combined. How do you feel about yourself after spending time with your child? Not how do you feel about them. Not how do you feel about the relationship. How do you feel about you? With a difficult child, time together might be tiring. It might be complicated. It might bring up feelings of worry or sadness or frustration. But when you walk away, you still feel like yourself. Your sense of who you are is intact. Your memories are your own. Your judgment of yourself hasn't been dismantled. You might be exhausted, but you are still you. With a toxic dynamic, that is not what happens. After time with a toxic child, even a relatively calm visit, you feel something specific. You feel smaller. You find yourself replaying the conversation, trying to figure out where things went wrong. You question your own memory of events. You wonder if maybe they were right. Maybe you are the problem. Maybe you have been the problem all along. You need days, sometimes, to recover from a single interaction. Psychologists have names for what's happening in those moments. Gaslighting, when your reality is consistently challenged until you no longer trust your own perception. Identity erosion, when repeated interactions slowly wear down your sense of who you are. These are not small things. These are not things you should simply learn to manage better. These are signs that something in this dynamic is causing genuine psychological harm. And I want you to sit with the most important sentence in this video. A difficult child challenges you. A toxic child diminishes you. That distinction, right there, is everything. I know what some of you are feeling right now, because I've seen it before. The moment when a parent hears these descriptions and recognizes something, and then feels the full weight of what that recognition means. And I want to be very clear about something. Recognizing that a dynamic is toxic does not mean you have to end the relationship today. It does not mean you have to cut contact. It does not mean you have failed as a parent. And it does not mean the situation is hopeless. What it means, the only thing it needs to mean right now, is that you have a clearer picture of what you're actually dealing with. And from that clearer picture, you can take 3 steps. Step 1, name it clearly. Not out loud to your child. Not as an accusation. But to yourself, and perhaps to one trusted person. Stop softening what's happening with phrases like, "They're just going through a lot," or, "That's just how they are." Call it what it is. Not as a verdict against your child, but as an honest description of what the dynamic is doing to you. Because you cannot make clear decisions about something you refuse to see clearly. Step 2. Set one specific boundary, and hold it. Not 10 boundaries. Not a complete restructuring of the relationship overnight. 1. Something small, something specific, something you are genuinely prepared to hold. Maybe it's, "I will not continue a phone call if the conversation becomes insulting." Maybe it's, "I will not discuss my finances with my child." Maybe it's simply, "I will not apologize for things I didn't do." Choose one. Hold it. And notice what happens. The response to that one boundary will tell you an enormous amount about the nature of this dynamic. Step 3. Get outside support. This is not optional. This is essential. One of the defining features of a toxic dynamic is that it erodes your ability to see clearly. Slowly, gradually, you begin to see the relationship and yourself through the lens the toxic person has constructed. You need someone outside of that lens. A therapist, a counselor, a trusted friend who knew you before all of this began. A support group. There are many, both in person and online, specifically for parents dealing with estrangement and difficult family dynamics. Not to validate every thought you have, but to give you a mirror. A real one. Because you deserve to see yourself clearly. After everything you have given, you deserve that. Before I let you go, I want to say something. I know this has not been an easy video to watch. I know that some of you came in today hoping I would tell you your child is just going through a hard time, that things will get better, that love is enough. And for some of you, that is true. Your child is difficult, and difficult is survivable. Difficult has a path through it. But for others, you recognize something today that you have been working very hard not to recognize. And I want to speak directly to you. What you recognize today is not a failure. You did not fail your child by watching this video. You did not fail your child by asking the question. You did not fail your child by finally, after years, perhaps decades, allowing yourself to see what has been happening. You loved them, more than they may ever know, more than you may ever be thanked for. And loving someone, truly loving someone, does not mean accepting any treatment they offer. It does not mean making yourself smaller so they can feel larger. It does not mean absorbing their harm in the name of keeping the peace. Real love, the kind that lasts, the kind that heals, the kind that actually stands a chance of transforming a relationship, requires honesty. Honesty about what is happening. Honesty about what you will and will not accept. And honesty about what you deserve. So let me tell you what you deserve. You deserve to end a phone call and feel okay. You deserve to leave a family gathering and still feel like yourself. You deserve to be in a relationship with your own child where your presence is welcomed, not weaponized. Recognizing the truth about a relationship is not an act of giving up on your child. It is an act of finally showing up for yourself, with honesty, with clarity, and with the dignity you have always deserved. That is what we stand for on this channel. Strong elderly life. Because strength at this stage of life doesn't mean having no pain. It means refusing to let pain be the only story. If this video helped you see something more clearly today, I want you to type just one word in the comments below. Clear. Because that is exactly what you deserve. Clarity, not confusion. Truth, not the comfortable lie that costs you a little more of yourself each year. And if you know someone who has been carrying this question quietly, a friend, a sister, someone from church, someone you've watched struggling with a child who seems to take more than they give, please share this video with them. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do for someone we love is hand them something that helps them finally see. If this is the kind of conversation that matters to you, real conversations, honest conversations, the ones that most channels won't touch, then please subscribe to Strong Elderly Life. And hit the bell so you never miss a new video. We are here every week. For the hard questions. For the honest answers. For you. I'll see you in the next video. Take good care of yourself. You've earned it.